The following is a Papi Chulo Radio original program. The views and opinions expressed in the commentaries and/or interviews in the following program are solely those of the individuals and are not views of Papi Chulo Radio, its parent, affiliate, or subsidiary companies.
The Avengers Initiative, WandaVision.
Welcome to the Avengers Initiative, WandaVision, a PapiChuloRadio.com original series. Papi Chulo Radio celebrating a decade of podcasting excellence. Today is Monday, February 15th, 2021, and I'm your host, Jeffrey Aruz. During this podcast, we'll be having an in-depth discussion on Disney Plus's WandaVision. Please welcome my co-host, Professor X.
Hello, everyone.
Let's jump into our discussion of Season 1, Episode 6, which was titled All New Halloween Spooktacular! And debuted February 12th, 2021 via Disney+. Here's the official synopsis of the episode. Disturbances on Halloween separate Wanda from Vision, who looks into anomalous activity in Westview. Now, I will say this, before I even start asking you anything, Professor, I just want to give props to the person, whether it's the Disney Plus person or the Marvel person, that writes the episode descriptions, because these are the episode descriptions that are found on Disney Plus. And they are incredibly creative at being hella vague, yet very appropriate for whatever the episode is. Because, yes, this actually happens in the episode, but this is like the vaguest way to say what happened in the episode. And I'm enjoying that. They're doing a really good job of being hella vague with all of these episode descriptions. You know, you could take it as, it could be anything that happens. But, you know, generally speaking.
Oh, yeah, they're doing a very good job in that.
Yeah, generally speaking, it is what happens in the episode, though. It's hella spoiler. It's hella, not spoiler, it's hella spoiler-free is what I'm trying to say. All right, Professor, so the first thing that I want to ask you is, are you a fan of the type of sitcom that was homaged in this episode? Now, last week, we sort of talked about the type of sitcom as 80s sitcom, and that's kind of what generally we considered the previous episode's WandaVision installment to be focused on. And this episode, we sort of jump into the 2000s. So it looks like we skipped the 90s. But then when I was sort of thinking about last week's episode, if you really think about the 90s in general, the early 90s are still hella 80s, and the late 90s basically lead into the 2000s. I don't know if the late 90s, I don't know if really 90s outside of 90s pop. I don't know if there's really anything on TV that is specifically 90s. I mean, it's still sort of a mixture of the 80s, especially towards the beginning of the 90s. So I guess maybe technically last week's episode could have been 80s and 90s, and this one could still have a mixture of 90s with its 2000 sensibilities, because Malcolm in the Middle, I checked, debuted in the year 2000. Clearly it was filmed probably in 1999 and that sort of thing. So however you want to take this question, Professor, are you a fan of maybe late 90s or early 2000s family sitcoms?
You know, I don't think I was watching much in the way of sitcoms at the time. There have been periods when, you know, I just wasn't watching a lot of TV. And so, I mean, I've never watched an episode of Malcolm in the Middle, though I'm culturally aware of it enough to realize that that's what they were doing in this episode. So, yeah, it does seem like they sort of skipped over the 90s. I mean, you could have done Friends, you could have done Cheers. But you know, because those ones, you know, don't really have the kids in them, that would have been more difficult to do. It makes more sense to jump to Malcolm in the Middle, I suppose, especially because that way you do get the the kids talking to camera and stuff like that, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of what they could have done for the 90s, like Roseanne, Home Improvement.
Seinfeld.
Well, that's not a family sitcom. They are a family.
No, well, that's what I'm saying is that, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
But I mean, when you think about the big ones, it would be Seinfeld, Friends, Mad About You, but they didn't bring a kid in until the end. Yeah, it's tricky. But I mean, you can't argue that, they have to do one from every decade.
True.
It's I think it's better that they don't, restrict themselves in that way because, we got a very good episode out of it. So.
Yes.
And honestly, the what's happening in the sitcom is becoming less and less important than it was in the first few episodes. So, it's more a conceit on which to hang, little plot twists and stuff like that than having to carry things like it did for the first 2 or 3 episodes.
Interesting. I might have to disagree with you on that a little bit later on because I feel like there's a whole lot of that happened during the sitcom section, which was very interesting. Priscilla's not here. I feel like she has referenced that she has seen Malcolm in the Middle. I have not seen Malcolm in the Middle either, but I didn't realize. I mean, I understood that that's what they were, homaging when we were seeing the sitcom elements of WandaVision.
Great theme song too. Like the words of the theme song this time.
Yes,
it was all about illusion and relaxing and going with the flow and everything like that. It felt much more overt. The lyrics seemed to play a lot more into what we're knowing about what's going on in the show than it did earlier.
Yes. Before I get into that, because I have a whole thing about the theme song. Yeah, I enjoyed what they did as far as I could recognize what they were doing with Malcolm in the Middle, and I did like that. I guess we skipped over the 90s, but it allowed them to take on something that started in the early 2000s, which was characters in essence breaking the fourth wall and talking directly to the camera, which I thought it was kind of interesting to see, especially because it was the kids talking to the camera. I believe on Malcolm in the Middle, Malcolm talked to the camera. So it gave Tommy and Billy a little bit more to do, which was interesting. So let's talk about the theme song. So the theme song was hella on the nose this time. I agree with you, Professor X. And the lyrics, as opposed to previous sitcom lyrics or previous theme song lyrics for the sitcoms that we saw for the other decades, the other ones, they were, it was more so talking about Wanda and Vision and talking about them as the characters. This one really was spot on what's going on. And if you focused on the characters that they showed during specific moments of the lyrics, it was just hella fascinating. Like, listeners, if you didn't pay attention to the theme song this time around, go back, put the captions on, and read the lyrics. Because when we see Wanda, it says, "Don't try to fight the chaos. Don't question what you've done," which I thought was interesting. When they showed Vision, "Some days it's all confusion, but if it's all illusion." That was interesting. When they showed Agnes, it's like, let's keep it going through each distorted day, which if you have a theory on Agnes being a part of this or trying to keep things going, I mean, that fit in with that. And then when we see Pietro, and we see him as Pietro Maximoff as himself, the lines are, though there may be no way of knowing who's coming by to play, which goes with my theory, and I think all of our theories, that Pietro is not who he says he is, which was interesting. So they did a great job with the theme song this week. It was hella interesting, hella fascinating, and it certainly dropped a lot of clues this time around. I mean, the visuals were hella chaotic, so if the listeners didn't get the chance to actually pay attention to what the lyrics were, go back and listen. It's an interesting listen. So this week...
Also, this is probably the last time we'll get a theme song like that, because when you think about it, once you go into the 2000s and the 2010s, sitcoms don't really have the sort of theme song that sets the conceit of the show anymore. It's just, a quickie instrumental thing like they do in The Office or 30 Rock or something like that, or even Parks and Rec. So I think for me, this might be the last time we get that sort of really overt clue in the lyrics.
You're right about that, Professor, because I believe the next one is the Modern Family episode, and Modern Family, it's just an instrumental that's like maybe 15 seconds. So yeah, this was our last taste of a sitcom with a theme song that has lyrics, and I think these were the most important lyrics that we've ever gotten, to be quite honest. Outside of maybe the first one that sort of introduced the romance, the whirlwind romance of Wanda and Vision, and then moving to Westview and that sort of thing from the 50s centric theme. Okay, so this was the Halloween episode. It was filled with comic booky goodness for everyone out there that loves the comic books. Professor, the costumes, what'd you think?
Oh, great. And like finally coming up with the justification for why the Scarlet Witch has that costume, a Sokovian fortune teller. And Vision, is the luchador, sort of, explaining why his costume, but also, giving them that sort of homemade feel to them. Not Wanda's, interestingly. Wanda's was very professional. Vision's was, obviously, something thrown together, as was Pietro's. So I thought it was great. It was like, a nod to the comics, but also that sort of sense of, it's almost like in the first X-Men movie, when they're talking about, what do you want? Blue and yellow Lycra. So it was good. It's sort of like, the sense of, what these costumes would actually look like in the real world, and just how silly some of the stuff would be. Now, sometimes they can pull it off. I think Spider-Man has a classic look. Doctor Strange managed to pull it off. But quite often, trying to take those costumes from the comics would look quite silly. So I love that. I thought it was, very well done. And also the justification, because they have to have some sort of reason to put Vision in that costume, and to claim it's Mexican wrestling was, I thought, just genius.
And the kids, if I'm not mistaken, they had similar outfits to what they wear in the comics, correct?
Yes, certainly. And it's interesting too because Billy, who is Wiccan, was wearing his costume basically from the beginning, whereas Tommy had to get his costume from Pietro later on. But in the comics, Billy is Wiccan and has that sort of, that basically, somewhat comics accurate version of his costume, whereas Speed has one that's, sort of a tribute to Pietro.
Very cool. All right, they did the damn thing when it comes to the costumes in this episode. Everyone looked fantastic. Okay, so in this episode, we got a little bit of a taste of what is still, a theme that was introduced in the previous episode, which was Vision, in essence, mistrusting Wanda. And it's something that pretty much started, it started in the previous episode, and especially towards the end. And in this episode, and we got it in the flashback, in the previously on, we had that line of, you can't control me or something like that, and Wanda's like, oh, can't I? And in this episode, Vision continued to, in essence, go off the script. We had the moment at the start of the episode where Vision kind of gruffly alludes to, well, there wasn't anything else in my closet. And he said that in a gruff sort of way, and then he brought on the sitcom charm and, sort of cleaned up the gruffness. But then at a certain point, Vision's like, okay, I'm going to do the neighborhood watch. Vagrants are out there. It's a hot spot for, illicit activity, basically. And we have the line from Wanda, but you're not supposed to do that. And he's like, what? And then she cleans it up as well. But there was that moment of Wanda, in essence, losing control of Vision. I mean, clearly it leads to everything else that happens in the episode. But was that something that you noticed upon first watch, Professor?
Yes, definitely. And it was clear, from, the way Vision was playing it. And that, even at the end of the scene where he just leans in and gives Wanda that very chaste peck on the cheek, it was obvious that, he is not being controlled by her. He's going off to do his own thing. They made that a bit more overt later in the episode, obviously. But I thought they did a really good job of grounding that early on because, it was, as you say, Vision talking about it was the only thing in closet, their clothes, but then sort of playing off the sitcom-y charm of it. And, even the scenes where they're looking at Pietro and the kids, it was really, Paul Bettany was walking a very, very fine line, in that opening scene, to sort of having to play the sitcom character to keep Wanda from realizing what he's doing, but still, not giving into it entirely. I thought was, really, really well done, and definitely, in that opening scene set up what was going to happen in the rest of the episode.
Exactly. Now, let's talk about Pietro just generally, because I have a lot of questions about Pietro with specifics that he does and that's said about him throughout the episode. But just generally speaking, what did you think of Evan Peters as Pietro, basically playing a sitcom chaos agent, a character that comes in, as he says to Wanda later on, to sort of spice things up, to bond with the kids, to annoy, his sister and her husband and that sort of thing. What did you think of seeing just Evan Peters as Quicksilver, but as a sitcom character?
He was great. And again, it's that sense of, the awareness of it, because, really that was the sitcom trope, right? Is that, you have your established characters, you bring in the outside chaos agent to shake things up. And then you go back to the status quo by the end. I thought it was very well done. And again, just the awareness he had of it, I thought was fantastic. It was, really well played. And there was a lot that came out. I thought his portrayal of it was really, really good. If he turns out not to be Pietro, as seeming increasingly likely, I was definitely getting some, during some of the scenes, I was getting some, interesting vibes off of him. But no, he played it, really well. Because on the one hand, he was playing the chaos agent, but then he could step out of the reality. But that said, Vision has been able to step out of the reality. The kids can step out of the reality. Her neighbor, dressed as Frankenstein, was able to step out of the reality. So it's interesting. Whereas, it seems that Wanda has absolute control. We're seeing that, her control is not as absolute as we might think, whether it's because it's people at the outside, the main heart of the story, or whether it's because there are these characters who increasingly seem to realize they're just characters and going along with it to keep her happy. And certainly we got a hint of that as well.
Did the kids step out of the reality? I don't know if I agree with that. I mean, later on, they do end up hearing stuff, but I don't think they really understand what they heard, or what the one child ends up hearing. So I don't know if I agree that they stepped out of the reality.
Well, Tommy obviously did at the end when he was... or Billy obviously did at the end when he was, sensing Vision outside the hex.
I don't know if I would call that stepping out of the reality. Well, I mean, I guess it would be stepping out of the hex, but I still think he was in his sitcom-y trope as the kid. I don't think he generally understood what was going on versus some of the other characters that we've seen, whatever we want to call it, stepping out of the reality, awakened, or whatever, where they seem to understand more of what's going on than they should, which leads to Herb. So there was the line. It was a tiny line, but it was very similar to what Agnes said in the previous episode. So Herb, dressed as Frankenstein, doing the sitcom shtick, neighborhood watch, and Wanda's like, oh, where's Vision? Where's he assigned? And he's like, oh, he isn't. And Wanda seems confused because that's what Vision said. And Herb, in essence, is like, is everything okay? Would you like me to change anything, Wanda? And she's like, oh, no. And she seems to play it in the sitcom-y kind of way, but we know what Herb is saying. What did you think of that moment, Professor?
Really interesting, again, because, we have gotten the sense that, a couple of episodes ago where Herb and Agnes are talking together, and clearly they're aware of the reality. It is strange. We sort of, had the sense that, Agnes was able to step out of it. And certainly last episode we saw that, where she was, don't want us to go back and do this from the beginning. Herb seemed to be doing the same thing. And again, it's interesting that there's only selected characters that seem to be able to do that. But later in the episode, of course, it seems that Agnes is basically reduced to, NPC status, until Vision breaks her out of it. So it is really interesting. I'm wondering whether, we talked a lot about, Agnes possibly being an established mystical character. I'm wondering if Herb might be as well.
Very interesting. I totally disagree with you about Agnes, and we will talk about that when we get to that point, because, interesting stuff there. I wonder, though, if Herb... Now, what happened in this episode, I feel like it either means that Herb is maybe a mystical character, or it still has to go back to Agnes, and him and Agnes's sort of their interaction during the 70s episode, because it could have been that at that point Agnes, whatever their conversation was, like Herb remained aware post that conversation, so he didn't go back in essence fully under, and maybe that could have been a point, maybe with the kids showing up, the kids being Tommy and Billy, that was maybe a point where Wanda started losing some of the control that she had about the world around her. Maybe. I don't know. Hopefully at some point, especially since we are headed into the the third act in this 9-episode series, maybe we'll go back and get a greater understanding of like what was going on underneath it all in some way, maybe flashbacks or even exposition. Who knows? All right, Professor, let's talk about this commercial. So we got a very late 90s, early 2000s kids commercial. It was done in claymation. I will say that all of the other commercials that we've seen were kind of focused on the typical American housewife, bouncy paper towels type of commercial, shampoo, body wash type of commercial, a toaster commercial. I mean, you could even say that the watch commercial was geared towards maybe, housewives, maybe getting that as a gift to their husband. But this one was centered on or focused on kids. It was a Go-Gurt type of commercial for a yogurt called Yo Magic. We see a kid with red hair and a red outfit on a deserted island, and they're hungry. They'll give anything, to satisfy their hunger. A shark appears and presents them with Yo Magic. The shark also says, snacking on Yo Magic, and the shark gives the Yo Magic to the kid. The kid is unable to open it and slowly becomes more and more and more frail until they die without snacking on any magic. And the tagline is something like, Yo Magic for survivors. This was probably the darkest commercial that we saw, at least yet, up to this point, on WandaVision. Like, I have my own interpretation of it. I feel the kid is Wanda. I feel like the shark is the big bad. I feel like the shark is leeching off of Wanda and Wanda's magic. And I feel like a lot of the symbolism about it, like having the magic there in your hands, but the magic not really satiating whatever it is that you want, it is clearly directed at Wanda. What did you think of it, Professor? Is that how you interpreted it? Do you have a different interpretation?
No, I definitely agree. I think that's the simplest and most obvious, is that the shark is some, the avatar of some external entity, Mephisto, nightmare, whatever, that was hungering, realized that Wanda was a source of magical energy and has been feeding off of her. As you say, I was kind of hoping bringing you here because people were talking about each of the commercials in the past was tied to an Infinity Stone. I was dying to see what justification they could have for this being an Infinity Stone. The claymation shark. No, I thought it was really, really interesting. The only thing that makes me wonder about that is it does seem so on the nose, so overt, that, when they do something like that, it's like when, Monica came out and said, it's Wanda, it's all Wanda. We immediately thought, well, then it can't be all Wanda because that's just too obvious. And we still do have 3 episodes left. I think it does seem much more likely that someone or something is manipulating Wanda to gain access to this energy. And the Yo Magic is, the manifestation of that.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I have read on social media people like interpreting the commercial in different sort of ways. So maybe it wasn't that overt to some people. That's what I got from the commercial. I will also say that the colors of the shark do kind of match Quicksilver's outfit. I'm just saying.
And he talked in a very similar way to the way that Quicksilver was talking.
Yes. He says something like, here you go, little dude. And I noticed that Quicksilver said, right on, little dude, to one of the kids. So there was that as well. I kept on trying to listen to the voice, and I was like, is that Evan Peters?
It sounds like him, but I don't know. And again, Evan Peters, apparently, did 11 characters in American Horror Story. So he's capable of changing his voice enough to throw us off, I'm sure.
Yeah, it didn't fully sound like him, though, because I'm a big fan of American Horror Story. He is fantastic on there, and yes, he does play. Every season, it's an anthology series, so every season it's a different theme, although they are all interconnected. So I've seen him play different characters, but I didn't sound like him as the shark. But, it could have been. You could have gruffed up his voice. I mean, and they could have also added effects to it, which deepened it a little bit. But, okay, so Pietro. Pietro was hella fascinating in this episode because, so he's there. He's got a different face. Wanda asks him about the different face. And he didn't really have an answer for it. What was fascinating about their dynamic throughout the episode, because it was Wanda and Pietro paired up throughout the entire episode, she kept on asking him questions. He would never answer. I think the only time he really answered a question was like, how did you get here? And his answer was, I got shot in the street like a chump, which we've seen how he died, and it wasn't like a chump. He was actually saving a kid and saving Hawkeye from the Ultron robots. So he didn't die like a chump, but he's like, I was saving, I died like on the street like a chump, and then I heard your voice.
You know what? If you die saving Hawkeye, you died like a chump.
Oh, that's so wrong. That's so wrong. And hilarious. All at the same time. And he's like, I heard your voice calling, and that's how I showed up, in essence. That was really the only answer he gave, because everything else was like, oh, he always like asked the question back to her, oh, you don't have your accent. Oh, you don't have your accent. So he was trying to, in essence, leech information from her. And she didn't really notice that. She did notice a couple things, though. I think she reacted a little bit when he was like, I died on the street like a chump. But then everything else, I think, intrigued her. So she sort of bypassed that. And then earlier in the episode, we saw a flashback, as, we see on sitcoms, where, they're in Sokovia, they're trick-or-treating. He's got on a Nick Fury costume. She's got on a Black Widow costume? I'm asking what the question was.
Okay, I've seen people say this online. That's nonsense. He was wearing an eye patch, and so everyone's assuming that, because she has red hair, she had antenna.
She did have antenna.
The Black Widow does not have antenna. And also, why would we assume that he would be dressing up as Nick Fury? Nick Fury was not famous at the time. He was the head of a spy agency. This would have been 20 years ago.
Well, because the point is, this is all Wanda's creation. So it has Easter eggs of Wanda's life, like the commercials. So that's why I was like, he has to be Nick Fury. She looked a little Black Widowish just from the clothes, but I didn't understand the antenna. And so I was trying to correlate it with the Marvel hero, but I didn't really. Then I was like, Mantis? But then I was like, but it looked more like a bug. And then I was like, is that
more like the Wasp, I would say,
Wasp?
than
yeah,
the classic comic version of the Wasp, which did have antenna when she shrank down.
And so, so they're trick or treating, and she's like, I don't remember that. And And I think that was something, because like it seems as if Pietro, whomever he is, in essence has maybe Pietro's personality projected on him, but he doesn't have the memories of the past, which is interesting because it leads to my theory about Pietro. So he keeps on asking questions, and basically the big question that he asks is, so how did you do it? Because he waxes poetically to her, like, all this, I'm impressed, where did all these kids come from? Oh, you probably had them asleep in their bed because you don't want to traumatize them outside of, the holiday cameo. You kept couples together, and their sitcom personalities mirror what their real life personalities are. You gave them better haircuts, you gave them better jobs. I'm really impressed. This is better than what you've done before, with the little, give them nightmares and do this, that, or the other. So I'm very impressed with you, my sister. How did you do it? And I think that was the big question that he wanted the answer to. And in essence, she was like, I don't really know how I did it. I was alone. I felt darkness and loneliness and trauma and sadness. And somehow this happened. So, Evan Peters as Pietro could be the big bad, or could be a hench person for the big bad, trying to find out how Wanda did it. That's just my based off of what Pietro was doing throughout the episode, that's what it led me to believe. Professor, what about you? What did you think of Pietro being hella inquisitive, but not being forthcoming with any answers? And did that lead you down, my theory, or are we in agreement with that, or do you have your own take on who Pietro could be?
I'm not willing to say this as a, one of my crazy, things that, 3 episodes from now we'll go, oh my God, I can't believe you called that. But
I know, right?
The way he was playing it, I was getting some very low-key Loki vibes.
Oh, Loki. That's interesting.
And think about it. Loki knows enough about, her background and stuff like that to impersonate him. He would be interested in finding out how she's doing all of this, because he'd want to take, but also he has that sort of professional sense, because Loki is a master manipulator. He's a deceiver. And so he had that sense of, I appreciate what you're doing here. Game recognizes game. I like how you're doing this. You keep the kids hidden, except for the holiday episodes and everything like that. Part of me would not be at all surprised to see, Loki reveal himself at the end of the episode, or at the end of the series.
That's fascinating. And
again, Loki being used, and again, that could mean that, the real big bad is still out there. And this is just like Loki dropping by as the god of mischief to see, hey, what's going on? I saw all of this magical energy and thought I'd come in and see what's going on. He's curious about it. But even, it's not like your dead husband can die again. If, that's exactly the sort of thing Loki would say. He would just go that little bit too far, being funny, and get in trouble for it. So I honestly do feel, it felt like, it sounded like, Sam Rockwell playing it. But of course, he already has a character in the MCU. But yeah, I couldn't get out of my mind the fact that, I could totally see Tom Hiddleston playing this scene with her, and doing it in exactly that way.
That's fascinating, because I've read a lot of theories as to who the big bad is, who Evan Peters could be, and that sort of thing. And I have not read Loki. You're the first. So if it does end up happening, kudos and mad props to you. The other theories that I've read, this was before this episode, and I feel like this episode would negate this 100%, but some people, when he showed up at the end of the previous episode, was like, maybe it's Doctor Strange. Maybe Doctor Strange sensed, because he's a magical person, sensed the magical disturbance in Westview and arrived and noticed what was going on and decided to shake things up to sort of be able to get into Wanda's mind to figure out how to fix everything or how to help her. After this episode, I don't believe that could be possible just because of the quip at the end where, it's not like you can kill your dead husband twice. I don't feel like Doctor Strange would have said that because that was, Doctor Strange does throw shade, but that was a little shade with a sting to it, and I don't feel like Doctor Strange would have done that to Wanda. And also there were a lot of, when Pietro talked, demon spawn, he talked about hell a lot. And I think that was, it might have been a little too on the nose, but I think that was supposed to clue us in that, at least it clued me in. I was like, all right, so you're clearly working with the big bad. That was just my take on it. I've read, as far as big bads or potential big bads, I mean, I think we've discussed them all in previous episodes, but people like Nightmare, Mephisto, Chthon, I think those are the sort of the main ones that people think it could be. Mephisto, Grim Reaper, Chthon, Nightmare. Those four potentially are the ones that people are thinking it could be. Which maybe this is if Evan Peters isn't the big bad, maybe he's the Grim Reaper reporting to Mephisto. A lot of people are still questioning Ralph. A lot of people are still questioning Dottie and maybe even Agnes as people that are in control or, could be the big bad in disguise. I don't know. That's something I can't tell you. But I do feel like Pietro is clearly not on the up and up, and he was fishing for information. He was trying to understand what was going on and whether he's the one that's leeching off of her magic or not. I guess we're going to have to wait and see.
Well, and that's why I don't think he's the big bad, because if he was Mephisto and the idea is that, some big bad set this up and lured Wanda into it to feed off of her, he would know how it was set up. Why would he be asking that question?
Very
Doesn't
true.
make a lot of sense.
Yes.
But yeah, and again, it could be Loki, could be, Mordo from Doctor Strange. I do kind of like the idea of it being Doctor Strange because Doctor Strange can be a bit of a dick. Remember in Infinity War, him and Tony. But yeah, I would totally love it to be Loki. And again, what a great way to set up the Loki series.
Yes, that would be the brilliant part of it all.
And again, he's not there because he's, because he's necessarily part of it. He's just, hey, this is interesting. I'm going to poke my nose in here and see if I can stir up some shit. And that is the sort of thing that Loki would do. And I believe that is going to be the heart of the Loki series, which is Loki traveling through time, just messing with people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with you on that. Very interesting. And it would tie the series together, both of them. So we'll have to wait and see. Quick little reference that I thought was interesting, Kick-Ass. So this was the first time that the sitcom really had, I wouldn't call that foul language, but certainly saltier language than we've seen before, because sitcoms usually are wholesome, especially family sitcoms. Once you get into the late 90s, early 2000s, you do see I don't even know what you would call it, because I wouldn't really call that curse word, but it is a saltier language, I guess, for lack of a better word, than sitcoms are used to. So the Kick-Ass reference, though, is a reference to the film, and both Pietros were in Kick-Ass, which I did not know. I think that's funny. Both Evan Peters and Aaron Taylor Johnson were in Kick-Ass together, and I enjoyed Elizabeth Olsen's delivery of Kick-Ass when she hears her kids say Kick-Ass. Okay, so Vision, while all that's going on, Vision is exploring Westview, and we in essence see that Wanda's reach in Westview wanes when you get to the outskirts of Westview. We learned that also because our people on the outside are viewing that via monitors and that kind of stuff, but we'll talk about them in a moment. So as sort of like the radius of Wanda, gets larger, or as the NPCs, whatever we want to call them, the residents of Westview, get further away from Wanda, it looks like her reach isn't that profound. We see a woman hanging Halloween decorations, and she's glitching back and forth. She almost hooks it, and then she doesn't. And her husband in the back is moving a jack-o'-lantern, and we see a single teardrop, fall from the woman's eye. As, she has this just repetitive, she's stuck. She's imprisoned. I mean, she's imprisoned in Westview, but she's stuck in this loop. Vision continues to explore, and then he gets to an area where I guess Wanda's reach is no longer felt, and people aren't moving at all. Wu on the outside says it looks like they're barely moving, but we saw them. Like maybe they're breathing, but they aren't physically moving. I thought it was incredibly chilling and done in such a spectacular Twilight Zone-y type of way. This leads Vision to fly up into the air. He looks around. He can hear people talking. He can hear trick-or-treaters. And his eye sort of gazes over to sort of the edge of town where he sees a car that is not moving. And this leads us to Agnes, Professor. Let's talk about Agnes. So Agnes and Vision have a conversation. She is awoken. You're Vision. You're an Avenger. What's an Avenger? Are you going to help us? Are you here to save us? Am I dead? Because you're dead. Dead, dead, dead. Ha, 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 ha. And all that type of stuff. Until Vision snaps her back into the sitcom mode. Okie dokie neighbor. Happy Halloweeny. What did you think of this, Professor? I have my own theory, but I don't even want to sway you because I feel like your theory is different than mine. How did you interpret this scene?
Well, I know a lot of people are interpreting it that, Agnes was manipulating the Vision to, push him on to go, but he was doing that anyway. And, it would assume that, his Mind Stone powers, that, are supposed to break them free of it, didn't work on her, which would have to be explained. So I think the simpler explanation is just that, she got to the limit of Wanda's power and, started glitching like the other NPCs did. He snapped her back to it. And, I'm just taking this one on the very simple level, even though we did have, her being aware last episode. So I don't know. I don't think there's justification in what she did, like for the interpretation that I'm seeing from a lot of people, which is that, this was clever manipulation on her part. I didn't see it there.
Okay. Well, I did. And I will explain, and you don't have to agree. It's perfectly fine. That's why we're here podcasting about it, because different theories make for interesting conversation. But I saw it differently. First of all, unlike everybody else, she was able to talk to Vision while she was stuck. Everyone else was frozen, and she was clearly way out. As opposed to even where Vision was, where the people were frozen solid, where they were doing, in essence, the mannequin challenge. So she was able to talk and communicate. And then when Vision, in essence, awakened her, the visual effect was different than what it was before. Like before, it was clearly like a yellow, sparky type of thing. This one, it was like a light. And that's why I don't know if it actually did anything. So I don't know if I want to call it manipulation. I do feel like she wanted to push him to do what he did so that Wanda could do what she did. And why, I don't know. But it did make me question Agnes a lot more this time around than before, because before I was questioning whether she was, awake and maybe she was an ally, maybe a little bit of a chaos positive or chaos neutral type of person. This moment made me question if she was more so aligned with whomever the big bad is, and is pushing along his or her machinations. I mean, she could be the big bad at the end of it all. But it made me question on whether she was an ally or not. Unless we find out later on that this was all a part of Wanda's original plan, and maybe she is helping Wanda's plan. I don't know. It left me really questioning Agnes. I thought Catherine Hahn was fantastic. I mean, she played confused to awakened Agnes to almost maniacal Agnes when she starts just screaming dead, 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 and she starts laughing maniacally. I mean, and then, she's slapped back into sitcom mode. She was fantastic throughout that entire sequence. But yeah, I think she was trying to push Vision even more. I know that Vision was already maybe headed in that direction, but I don't think he was headed at the direction of finding out what was at the barrier of Westview, and the fact that she was way out there, like at what was it, Ellis Avenue or whatever it is, Ellis Street, where Wanda told the kids they can't go past. The fact that she was there, and it was like a hop, skip, and a jump from the barrier. I think she was trying to maybe not manipulate him, because maybe that's a bit of a strong word, but she was certainly there to push him.
Well, and I think I think you can look at that in a couple of ways. One is that, you suggested she was pushing him in order to prompt Wanda to expand that. And again, I think that's going too far. I think a simpler explanation is that if you're arguing that Agnes has always had a level of this awareness, that she, like Herb, is aware they're being manipulated, maybe she drove out to Ellis Avenue thinking she could escape and just couldn't make it. Her, motivation of Vision might just have been, hey, you're an Avenger, send help, save the people who are being tortured here. So I think that's a much simpler interpretation of it. Now, obviously, there's a lot of stuff there. It's circles within circles going on in this show. So it could very well be the opposite. And it's entirely possible that, the fact that, I think Catherine Hahn's playing it so great that I don't want her to be the bad guy.
Yeah, I don't want her to be the bad guy either.
But,
I don't.
Yeah, I'm willing to accept a simpler that, she is aware of it and she was trying to get away to seek help. I think another interpretation of, and again, we don't know she's Agatha Harkness. We really don't know that. She
was dressed as a witch.
She might be there because of the big bad. She might be there to fight the big bad alongside Wanda, rather than being someone who's directly involved with the manipulation of her or anything like that. So, and again, the idea that, she and Herb might be trying to keep things going along in order to draw out the big bad, in order to do that. So, I mean, that's another interpretation that I think is equally valid.
True. She was dressed as a witch, though, and
well, yes.
I mean,
they gave us that one. And by the way, if you want to get into it during the opening sequence, on the back of her sweatpants, it said naughty. So obviously, she's the big bad.
No, I don't think she's the big bad. I do think she's naughty, though. So I think she's clearly doing stuff. I do like your interpretation of it, just because I don't want her to be a bad guy as well. If she is a bad guy, I want her to be able to be a rehabilitated bad guy, kind of like someone, in essence, kind of like Wanda, because she was villainous in Age of Ultron. I mean, she was against the Avengers, but then, she became an ally and an Avenger herself. So if she is being naughty right now, my hope is that she's able to be reformed, because from what you've said, Professor, and from what I've read about Agatha Harkness, she does become, or she is an ally to the Scarlet Witch. So I do want to see that happen, just because I want to see more of Catherine Hahn on the screen, and I'd love to see her.
Yeah, definitely. We'd love to have her coming back in other shows and stuff like that.
Exactly, and in other films. Like, I would love to see her just even if it's a cameo, just show up, craft a little magic, and then have a little fun, and then she saunters off or something like that. Like, I think that would be amazing. She's playing this character perfectly, so I don't want her to be a bad person.
And we still haven't seen Dottie in quite some time, have we?
No, yeah, not since, what was it, it was the 70s episode, a quick little cutaway.
Yeah, that was all we got, just reminding us that Dottie is out there.
Yes.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, again, kudos to them for creating this in such a way that, we can, that there are, from the available evidence, we can all do that. Although I do find it funny. I saw a funny meme on someone's recap blog where they were saying, it's basically, it's a guy standing there with a butterfly in front of him. And the meme is,
Professor, I
so
lost
the
you.
idea being,
Oh, wait, I lost you,
every
Professor.
character who shows up as being Mephisto.
Wait up, Professor, because I didn't hear any of it. All it was, I saw the meme with the guy with the butterfly, and then you cut out. So can you repeat that again, please?
Oh, sorry. Sure. There's this meme. It's an animated, sort of, a cartoon style of a guy standing there pointing at a butterfly, and over the guy it says WandaVision viewers, and over the butterfly it says that must be Mephisto. The idea being that we are all pointing at every character we see on the screen and going, that must be Mephisto. It'd be
That's
really funny
funny.
if Mephisto doesn't show up. It's kind of a waiting for Godot. Waiting for Mephisto.
That's hilarious. Yeah, I know that meme. That meme is used for a lot of stuff, and it's funny that they made a WandaVision version of that meme. But yeah, we are apparently waiting for Mephisto. Yeah. Okay, so we talked about Agnes, which was hella fascinating. Well, let's go outside of Westview and let's talk about a couple things before we get to what happens at the end. So, outside of Westview, we're basically catching up right after Wanda's appearance outside of Westview in the previous episode. And, man, it's like... Oh, gosh. Like, I tried to root for this man for a moment, because I was like, you know what? You have a connection with the Rambos, Mama Rambo, Maria Rambo. You have a connection with Monica. So I was rooting for him. But, man, he just turned into just the stereotypical, as you say, Professor, bureaucratic head. And it just, I was, in essence, I went from trying to root for Hayward to being completely against him and being for, of course, our people, Monica, Darcy, and Jimmy. What did you think of the confrontation between Monica and Hayward? Because I do think, regardless of what I think about him, because I think he's clearly up to some nefarious shit. I feel like he was trying to do something with Vision's body, the technology. I feel like Wanda saved Vision because they were doing nefarious shit. They, being SWORD, were doing nefarious shit with his carcass those 5 years. But he did make some interesting points that did allow me to sympathize with him for a second. He was like, oh, you people, you guys were blipped. You don't know what happened. You guys still have the wide-eyed optimism. Like, you don't know about what it was like. And I was like, you know what? I can sympathize you just a tiny bit. But then he was a dick. And I couldn't. But I loved Monica's line of, don't let your past 5 years, allow you to be a coward or something like that. I was like, ooh, that was a burn. Professor, Monica and Hayward, what did you think?
Well, I've said it before. I would like, a show where, the middle-aged mediocre white guy wasn't the bad guy. Representation matters. But no, yeah, they've been setting it up. He was, we got some certain sketchy vibes off him from the first episode. Certainly, we've been seeing more and more of it. But I can't help but think about, the fact that drone was still glowing red when they brought it out. Now, presumably, it's been reabsorbed back into the hex by the end of the episode. But I did wonder whether they were setting something up with that. I think he was justified up until the point where he invoked Maria Rambeau, and at that point, that was just like, okay, well, he's gone too far.
Yeah, I think the drone was foreshadowing of what we learned later on, which we will be discussing actually next. So let's start talking about this. So Monica, Darcy, and Jimmy get kicked out of the base, but there was a moment of badassery with Monica and Jimmy where they take down the sword agents and they sneak back in. Darcy does a little hackulation of the situation and starts getting into Hayward's files, and we learn a couple of different things via Darcy's hacking of the files. Number one, Hayward has been able to track Vision. He's been tracking Vision's vibranium signature, and so he's been able to see where Vision is going, what he's doing, in essence, as well as he's been able to get maybe sort of an accurate head count of how many people are in the Maximoff anomaly, the Hex. We also learn that he has a copy of Monica's blood work, and the blood work reveals that her cells are changing on a molecular level due to the fact that she went through the boundary twice. So there's that. There's also there was something that she found called what was it? It wasn't Operation Cataract, but it was labeled Cataract, which was interesting. And she ends up emailing it to Wu because Wu and Monica end up disappearing because they're about to meet her guy who's going to help her get back into the Hex. Another sort of allusion to her guy, which is interesting, which maybe we'll meet her guy in the next episode. So there is a lot to break down right here, Professor. So let's break it down. The moment of badassery with Monica and Jimmy. Monica's cells changing on a molecular level. I hear Priscilla screaming photon in the background. She's screaming it through the snow. So there's that. And why were they tracking Vision? Professor, why didn't you tell anybody? Why was this a surprise? And and what was that cataract thing that she found? What do you think?
Many questions in there. Let's deal with them, attempt to systematically. So his tracking of Vision, I think, is because, as we said before, they've had Vision's body for 5 years. They've been experimenting on it. I think that this is, modifications that they've made to it. When they're doing the Vision tracking, it actually says, when when Jimmy goes off and looks at the border and then it goes back to him, it says, what was it? Asset. Reacquired. An asset is usually a term you use for something that is working for you. It didn't say target reacquired, it said asset reacquired, which makes me think that Sword was working on Vision, trying to turn him into a weapon. Mm-hmm. And this is a vestige of that they can track him and possibly, even manipulate him to try to get him out and come back to them. Because, he certainly seemed to know where Vision was going. I guess they could tell it from the tracking. Obviously, and, the project for turning him into a weapon is presumably Cataract, which, if you look at the fine print underneath it, it does say classified weapons. And Cataract, of course, is something that clouds your vision. So, very funny, Marvel people. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think the speculation that we had last week or the week before that Sword was dealing some shady stuff with Vision's body for those 5 years is going to hold up, and that they were trying to turn him into a weapon, and that probably is what Wanda found out about this, which is why she broke into the Sword facility, grabbed his body, as we speculated, and took it off to Westview to do this. Now, that said, who told her about Vision's body? Who tipped her off about that? Was that an inciting incident that someone, tipped her off to this to get her to this point? I don't know, but I think what we're going to find out is that yes, and so I think that answers all the questions that were raised in there. Did I miss any? You
did. Well, but before we get into Monica's cells.
Monica's obviously becoming Photon. Come on, we knew that. As soon as we saw Monica Rambeau come back. As soon as I saw Monica Rambeau in Captain Marvel, I knew she was going to become Photon.
Okay, well, there you go.
Or Captain Marvel. She was also known as Captain Marvel for a while.
Yes. Okay, all right. I like it. Okay, so, yeah. Now, my hope is that Hayward was the one doing the nefarious stuff with Vision, because I don't want this, because we learned that Maria was the creator of S.W.O.R.D. She was clearly dealing with cancer and that sort of thing. So my hope is that
she's been dead for 3 years.
Correct. So my hope is that she didn't know about this, or that he did it once he got the power. Because I want him to remain the evil one, if I'm being honest.
I don't think they'd besmirch Maria's legacy in that way.
Yeah, I agree.
But no, I agree, and that would make sense. Like that. If he'd only been doing it for a while. But and again, talking about ways to wrap this up. Nick Fury blipped back 9 days or 2 weeks ago, so maybe he's going to show up at the end of it and take control of S.W.O.R.D. away from Hayward.
That would be awesome. I would not disapprove of that.
Oh,
yes.
the guy. We didn't mention the guy. Okay, so I realized that if we do not meet the guy, and she says, "Hey, Reed," to him, the internet is going to lose its freaking mind. And also, if Reed is not played by John Krasinski, they're going to lose their freaking minds. I want to suggest something else. She could know another aerospace engineer. Because back in the Captain Marvel movie, there was a Skrull who was able to convert, an ordinary ship into a spaceworthy ship.
Oh, yes.
And she, had her Skrull friends and stuff like that. I would be surprised to maybe reinvoke the Skrull. Now, that said, would I love to see that, Reed is there and he's got 3 friends with him because they have to help him drive this in there? Sure, I would love to see that. But I don't know if they're going to go the Fantastic Four route just yet. And again, they might just introduce him, and leave that hanging out there. But it would be a way, for them going through it to gain their powers, similar to the way that Photon gains her powers. So that could give us our Fantastic Four. But I would not be surprised to see a Skrull prop up.
I actually like that a lot. I will also say, since we're talking about Skrulls, some people think Hayward is a Skrull, one of the evil ones. I don't know why they're thinking that, but I have read that actually a lot online. People think Hayward is a Skrull, and you can't convince them otherwise. So I just wanted to put that out there. I did read about Reed. It was like all over the place over the weekend. People do really want John Krasinski for whatever reason. They're like, he looks exactly like the character in the comic books. It needs to be him. I did read an interesting casting suggestion. Some people were saying William Jackson Harper from The Good Place as Reed. And I was like,
he'd be good.
Yes. I was like, that might be really interesting, especially because we know the MCU is really trying to be incredibly diverse. Moving forward from Phase 4, which we're currently in, and onward, that might be interesting. I would dig that.
He's very good. My only reason for wanting John Krasinski to play Reed Richards is you could probably get Emily Blunt to play Sue Storm.
Yes, that is true. And
wouldn't that be fun?
Yes. Although the casting that I saw online, some people put John Krasinski, and for whatever reason, they want Sue and Reed to be interracial. At least those are the suggestions that I keep on seeing on social media. They recommended Nicole Bahari from Sleepy Hollow fame.
Oh, never watched it.
Okay, but I've seen her a lot as Sue, which I don't know why, but the internet seems to like that.
I like William Jackson Harper. He's bulky, but he's not as bulky as Krasinski. And Krasinski, because he's bulked up for Jack Ryan, I think he's too bulky to play Reed Richards. Reed should be a slimmer fellow, I think. But William Jackson Harper plays smart very well.
Okay, well there you go. Okay, so we'll see. I'm assuming we're going to have to meet this person in the next episode. I feel like it just has to happen.
Well, and also, if there is going to be a big bad, they have to be introduced in the next episode. We're in the final third of it. You can't go introducing a character in the last 2 episodes. It would just be such a cheap cop-out. If there is a real big bad, they have to be revealed in the next episode. We don't necessarily have to do the Reed thing, or whoever her guy is, because she did say it would be about an hour. And so if they're doing everything in real time now, you could justify pushing that off for another one. But my suspicion is that things are going to really start picking up in the next episode in terms of a big bad reveal, in terms of her guy guy, whoever that is, and going back in.
I do agree with you on that. Yeah, 100%. I feel like the big bad has to be revealed in the next episode. If there is another big bad, if it's not all Wanda, if there is some sort of supernatural being leeching off of Wanda, I feel like it has to be revealed in the next episode. Because I think the last two episodes will have to be the battle, in essence. Wanda realizing, what's going on. I think the next episode will be us knowing who is behind it, maybe, and then the following episode will be Wanda's realization that maybe she's being manipulated or maybe she's being used, whatever. And then the final, and maybe that might kickstart a big battle, and then the final hour will have to be, in essence, the battle for Wanda's soul or something like that.
Well, and there was a line about that in this episode before Monica got thrown out by Hayward, which is that, Wanda is going to be the solution to the problem.
Correct.
You can't attack her and try to kill her. She's the only one who can fix this. And and I agree with you that is going to have to be the resolution to it.
100%. 100%. Okay, so let's see. Did we discuss everything outside that was important? Yes.
Darcy?
Well, Darcy. Well, what do we want to talk about? Darcy getting handcuffed? Because that's what we're going to talk about in a moment.
Okay.
Okay.
I just wanted to make sure we hadn't missed that because.
Oh yes. Oh no. Yeah. Darcy was everything. Okay. So Vision starts walking towards the barrier, and he struggles, but he makes it through. Beep 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 beep. They're tracking Vision. Hayward and his goons, go and meet Vision where he emerges from the hex. And he's still struggling. We notice that sort of pieces of him are being ripped from him and being thrown back into the hex. Darcy, runs outside. She's like, why aren't you helping him? She ends up getting handcuffed to a car and that sort of thing. And inside, Billy is Wiccan, right? Correct?
Yes.
Okay. So inside the hex, over the course of this episode, the twins' powers have emerged. Tommy has super speed, and in essence, Billy has his mother's telekinesis, whatever you want to call it, her powers. And he hears his father in pain. He goes to his mom. His mom's like, where is he? And he can see the soldiers. He can hear what's going on, and he can even read their minds. And they're like, they think he's dying. So Wanda ends up freezing everything in Westview. Her eyes glow, and she increases the radius of the hex. So what this means is that the hex starts to grow, and it starts sucking up the entire Sword camp. We don't see what happens to Darcy. We just know that she's handcuffed to a car. I believe we specifically don't see what happens to Darcy so that we can be surprised in the next episode. I will also say that Vision does actually look at Darcy. Like, we see them actually look eye to eye, which that's going to be interesting because depending on what Vision remembers, he might remember her. And so just I'm just telling everybody, including you, Professor, just bookmark that because I do think that moment was important. Everyone else gets turned into the circus. The circus has come to town, and all of the Sword agents turn into circus performers, clowns, mimes, etc. Both Monica and Jimmy, it appears, are able to fully escape because they were way ahead in their car, driving, and then they even speed off. Hayward and his goons, at least the ones that are in the SUV with him, it looks like they escape, but they came really close. I will give props to the VFX. This is a TV budget, but they are given the budget of, it appears, a Marvel movie, because I thought the SUVs sort of took us gently rubbing up to the hex. I thought that was an awesome bit of visuals. Yeah, I mean, it really looked like the hex was about to suck that car up, but they are able to escape. Hayward calls his people, and nobody's answering because they're all clowns inside of the hex. I will say a funny little quip. I posted this on social media because I thought of it and it made me laugh. I was like, look at our girl, Dr. Darcy Lewis. She got cast on her favorite TV show, Dreams Do Come True. And she was the fan. She was invested in the WandaVision series, so now she's a part of it. I think it will be a funny gag if she ends up being a waitress at a diner, just because... that might be a little too on the nose, kind of like how we didn't get a You Got It Dude. Although I will say TV Line, they were disappointed that we did not get some sort of Olsen reference during the 80s episode. But so was I. So at least like minds. Professor, let's talk about this ending. Wanda has increased the radius of the hex. Vision broke free. And his first thing was, you need to help the people. Which shows us, once again, it's proof as to why he was worthy to pick up Mjolnir. Darcy is in a sitcom now? Come on, break it down for me, Professor. What did you think of everything that happened at the end of the episode?
First off, getting back to my theory from, many episodes ago that Wanda has gone completely evil, broken bad. When she is expanding the hex and she's, changing the soldiers, she changes them into clowns and mimes. What is more evil than that?
I know, right?
Clowns and mimes. She's giving the world more clowns and more mimes. There's just no call for that. Okay, here's what I thought was going to happen, and I was gobsmacked that this did not happen. I was convinced that everything up to a certain point was exactly what I was expecting. Wanda realizes she expands the hex to envelop Vision and bring him back into the safety. You'll notice that, when Vision is brought back through the hex, his body goes back to the way it was before. Mm-hmm. I was absolutely convinced that it would stop there and, Darcy would be like, a foot away from it. And so I did not see the expansion continuing. And correct me if I'm wrong, by the end of the episode, I guess we didn't see the outside of it with the hex stopping. What we saw was Wanda's eyes no longer glowing red. So we can assume the hex is no longer expanding, but that is an assumption. But, if the argument is that, so again, using the Monica Rambeau, if going through it maybe twice is what's necessary for you to gain superpowers, then, if Darcy is on the inside and Wanda, voluntarily gets rid of it in some way, maybe all those people won't be transformed into superhumans, or maybe they will. It's interesting. But yeah, I was totally not expecting Darcy to end up inside the hex. That took me completely by surprise. And also, I think the entire sword facility, except for Hayward and his two goons, has been absorbed because he was calling on his radio and no one was responding. So my feeling is that she has enveloped everyone. Like, the only people out there who have any idea what's going on now are Hayward and the two goons and Monica and Jimmy and her guy. Mm-hmm. So, we're going from the situation where you had this full, sword setup, command center and, all the resources and stuff like that, to a situation where you don't have any of that, which presumably will make it, easier for Monica and her team to get in there. But yeah, my feeling is that, and again, it might be, and there's different ways, like maybe Monica goes through it again and it reverses everything and she's not Photon. But my feeling is that, there's going to have to be something. And again, the only solution to this is, they have to break through to Wanda and get her to undo this. I think, as Monica said, she's the only way that you can undo this. But there will be a malign force trying to keep it going, to feed off of her. And I think the battle is going to be Vision, possibly with an assist from Darcy, possibly with an assist from Monica, maybe with an assist from the twins, maybe Agnes, reaching out to Wanda to get her to undo this, realizing that in so doing, she's sacrificing her happy ending. She's going to have to, Vision's going to have to die. She might lose the twins, unless, there's a friendly figure there with a Tesseract who can, blip them away to another universe or something like that. But yeah, I think we're setting up, as we speculate for some time, it's not going to be a happy ending.
Yeah. Although I hope that there is a little bit of happiness at the end of this. I do. I mean, I know. Okay, this is the happiness. Well, before I even get there, let me break down, or at least let me talk about what we saw. So I'm super excited. Darcy is in Westview. I can't wait to see who she is, and I do think that moment with Vision, that brief look into each other's eyes. I think he's going to. My theory is when she's in there, he might be the one that helps her remember because he's going to recognize her. This is all dependent on the idea that he's going to remember everything, which I hope he does. At least I hope he's. I hope that if she's able to snap him back into the sitcom mode, I hope something happens where he does start questioning things again, and then he remembers everything. Because I think he will be the one that will be able to help awaken her. At least that's my hope. Her being Darcy. I do think now that the radius is larger, I mean, if we already saw what was going on at the edges of Westview, I'm going to guess that her powers and her control over things, now that she has an even larger Westview to deal with, that's going to cause problems, and things are going to get a little wonkier. I don't think her grip on everybody is going to be able to hold, which might be interesting to see Wanda have to, recover from stuff and to fix things and use her powers a little bit more regularly, especially out in the open, trying to keep her influence on the Westview residents as well as the new residents as well. There are a lot of theories online about mutants emerging because of the Hex and that sort of thing. I don't know what I want as far as mutants. I read this interesting article that was like, WandaVision doesn't necessarily need to create mutants. There doesn't necessarily have to be a reason why mutants exist. There doesn't have to be a cataclysmic event as to why mutants exist. They could have always existed. Mutants in essence were always hiding anyway. It really wasn't until a certain point in the comics when they outed themselves to the world. So mutants can always exist. They don't necessarily need Wanda to throw the hex around the entire globe, and then that's how mutants are created. Because in essence, I feel like this series is proving to us that it wasn't necessarily one of the Infinity Stones that awoken that gave Wanda and Pietro their powers. It looks like it was always in them, and that maybe it was the stone that triggered the awakening, but I don't think the stones gave her powers or gave Pietro his powers either. So if that's
as was speculated on this podcast a few episodes ago, because during it was mentioned at the end of Captain America, the Winter Soldier, that they were the only two survivors, so there had to be something special about them.
Yes,
that was brought out.
But we didn't really think of it in that way then, because the idea of mutants being in the MCU was a no-no because Fox owned the film rights to the X-Men. But now that Disney owns Fox, I mean, that's an easy way, and it would be the simplest way to retcon. Because in essence, it wouldn't be a major retcon where we're completely changing a character's backstory. We're just being enlightened to something that the characters didn't know at the time. So I hope that they go that route, and I hope that it isn't that the Hex envelops the entire Earth, and that's how mutants appear. But if they need a reason, if people out there specifically need a reason, I mean, I guess that isn't really that bad of a reason. Anyway, period. Okay, so what else? The clowns were fantastic. I mean, the way that she clowned on them was spectacular. It was so good. The fact that we got to see the Scarlet Witch in her comic book costume, I should say, wielding the hex magic was spectacular. I enjoyed that as well. I do think the hex stopped. I feel like when we saw Hayward and his people sort of drive away, we saw like the barrier stop, and they kept on driving. It didn't look like the barrier was catching up to them. I do wonder how big it got. Did it double in size? Because it looked like it went for a good amount of time. So I wonder how large the hexagon now is. And I am really excited to see Monica and maybe even Jimmy break the barrier and arrive there in their sitcom form. I do wonder once again, because Vision knew Geraldine. If he sees her, like, will he go and awaken her? Like, will Monica be Geraldine again? And would he be like, oh, I remember, and like he awakens her, and then that's how he's able to gain some intel, and that's how Monica is able to, get her real persona into Westview. I mean, it's interesting. There's a lot of stuff that needs to happen in the next episode, because the next episode basically has to be the episode that sets up the final act. So the good thing is that Disney Plus has already announced that all of the final episodes, the 3 final episodes, will be an hour long. I do wonder if that means an hour including the not commercials, the end credits, because the end credits are at least like 5, 6, 7 minutes. So hopefully it's an hour.
That this time I was like, because I'm watching it thinking, oh, maybe there's going to be a post-credit sequence finally, and it's just 5 minutes of credits.
Yeah. So hopefully it's an hour, not including those 5 minutes. So yeah, because there's a lot that needs to happen. Professor, any theories? Anything that you think is going to anything that you want to see in particular in the next episode?
Well, if there is a big bad, I want them revealed, because I think you have to do that. Now, having said that, if we have 3 hours left, then I guess you could. It seems like such a cheap thing. It's like breaking the laws of detective fiction. The rules of detective fiction are you have to give all the clues to your reader. So I think for them to suddenly in the last 2 episodes bring up, oh, I was the big bad all along, ha ha ha, that would feel kind of cheap to me. I do agree that I think the look between Darcy and Vision was significant, and that Vision is going to see Darcy, whether as a waitress, probably not, but if they did, that would be hilarious, and wake her up. But yeah, I think what's going to happen is, if there is a big bad, they'll have to be revealed in the next episode. We may find, Hayward is trying to do something even bigger and nastier, to attack it. And, there's, arguably a justification to be made for that, because, the hex is really dangerous and has just gotten much bigger. So, we may see, more discussion and stuff like that going on. But ultimately, I think the battle will be, with Wanda on the inside. And it might be that, in order to, for all the people that she just, brought through the barrier once, maybe she will have to expand the barrier all the way around the world in order that they don't go through it a second time and end up like Monica. Or it might be something that she can undo on her own. I think there's, a lot of stuff that's still up in the air. And, as I said before, kudos to them for giving us so many red herrings and things that we're jumping at, that must be Mephisto, that we've been, doing it for all these episodes, and we'll probably be doing it for the next 3 as well.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of herring, she did threaten to turn Pietro into pickled herring. And was that fish a herring that they gave him?
I don't really know my fish all that well.
Okay, I don't either. But that would have been funny if it was a herring.
I've always thought a herring were smaller than that, but...
Okay, it could have been. Yeah. I did look up, apparently the commercial shark voice was voiced by somebody named Adam Gold. Now, whether if that's a real name or a real person, because sometimes they'll put fake people if it's somebody.
Yeah, and Tatiana Maslany was not cast as She-Hulk.
Yes. Well,
they lie to us all the time, those lying liars.
Yes. Yeah. So, okay. So I agree with you. I feel like the big bad needs to be introduced in the next episode. My hope is that they don't wait until the very end of the episode to introduce us to the big bad. I hope that we find out sooner rather than later in the episode. I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be the Modern Family episode, so that means we're going to get a lot of one-on-one camera time with probably, I don't know if I don't think Vision would do it unless he is sucked in at the start of the episode into the sitcom motif. If not, it's definitely going to be Wanda talking to the camera, which might be kind of interesting. And my hope, and I don't know how they're going to do this, my hope is that maybe the next to last episode, we figure out, or we're shown via flashbacks, exactly how the hex happened. And I don't know if it needs to be an hour-long episode. I mean, depends on exactly what they want to show us and how they want to present it to us. But I do feel like we need an extended flashback sequence really detailing how this happened. And I would prefer it to happen in the second to last episode, just because I want the last episode to be focused on whatever we want to call it, saving Wanda's soul, Wanda breaking the hex, maybe some cataclysmic fight with the big bad, whatever we see at the end. I would want it to be just focused on that versus them having to give us a lot of exposition or flashbacks as to how this all happened. Those are my hopes. We'll wait and see. And a lot more Agnes. Yeah. Give me one-on-one camera with Agnes. I mean, yeah. That'd be fun. Okay, so I think we covered everything. Was there anything, a teeny tiny little moment, Professor, that you want to discuss?
This is probably just an oversight on someone's part, but I did notice that when Vision was walking towards the barrier, we could see his breath, which is probably just a function of they were shooting at night and it was cold. But a synthezoid shouldn't have breath, so I was wondering whether it was an intentional thing they put in. Or something that they just missed.
I did read that as well. Again,
but I noticed everyone else on the other side of the barrier, it was also their breath, so I'm guessing it was just something that they missed. As I know, it's fairly easy to add breath in VFX, but I would guess getting rid of it's probably more expensive and trickier.
Yeah, it might have been a chilly night in Atlanta. But something that might be interesting to see again is, did Vision have breath when he was outside of the barrier? Like, did he have breath in the barrier because of the hex? And did he not have breath outside of the barrier because he's no longer in the
that would
hex?
be interesting. I don't think we could really, I don't recall seeing any breath, but there was so much VFX around him as his body was being ripped apart that, it would have been difficult to see.
Yes. And I guess to close this out before we head into the MVP, we have like 100% confirmation now that Vision cannot survive outside of the hex. So there is that.
Now, and again, so I mean, it might be the question of someone who is trying to manipulate the Scarlet Witch to use more of her powers might say, hey, all you have to do is expand the hex so it completely covers the entire Earth, and Vision can survive anywhere on Earth.
Mm-hmm. And your children.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Now we don't know about the children, but yeah. But again, if you got a friendly figure there with a tesseract who could just blip them off to another reality, and then you could collapse it. Yeah, it's a possibility.
Yeah. I don't want to lose Vision. Like I just don't. So I hope. I don't know. I don't know how they're going to do it because clearly he can't live outside of the hex. So unless he gets,
I've said they're going to kill him for some time now.
I know, unless they bring him back as the gray husk. Vision, which they could do. I mean, I like Paul Bettany, so seeing him play a different iteration of Vision, I think would be interesting as well. I do think she's going to be allowed to keep the kids for whatever reason. I don't know why, but I think, especially because of Young Avengers, I think the kids are going to stick around. I still don't know how it's going to happen, but I do think they will stick around. I do think Wanda's going to go.
Yeah, and I think that will be to the extent that, because again, if Wanda lost Vision and her two kids, then that would just be horrific to her. I think Vision will die, sacrifice himself, insist that no, you have to do this. Which unfortunately is getting eerily close to the end of Infinity War, isn't it? I have to sacrifice myself to save the world, and you have to do this. Oh God! Now I'm hoping they don't do that. But I think keeping the kids around. Also, I like the two kids they've got playing Tommy and Billy. I think they're great.
Yeah, they're fun. I like them. But I do think, and I think the end of this will have Wanda really succumbing to the madness. Like, I don't think we're going to get Wanda, like, fully, I have grieved, Like, I don't think we're going to get that Wanda at the end of this. Whether she goes fully mad and, maybe uses some sort of interdimensional powers where she, disappears and then we don't know where she is, and that's why Doctor Strange has to go into the multiverse of madness.
I think you almost have to do that because you can't have her staying on Earth after she's just done this.
Yeah. So I think
who's going to trust her? There, it's and I think that would open up a situation that she is out there, possibly. And again, as I say, perhaps if the twins survive, but only by being removed from the Earth, then maybe this is going to be her seeking after them and not caring what she does in the aftermath of it, and Doctor Strange has to lend a hand.
True. I did read an interesting theory online where people were saying that because Doctor Strange had what was the stone that he had? The Time Stone?
He had the Time Stone, but doesn't anymore.
Okay, correct. So because the stones no longer exist, in essence, if we're going to go with the theory that the stones don't exist, or even if we go with the theory that Priscilla has that somehow Wanda has absorbed all of the stones, the theory that I read online was like, what if because the stones in essence aren't physical, they aren't in existence, that in essence unlocked supernatural doors that were closed because the stones were in their proper form. And that's why some of these supernatural forces that maybe weren't around before, they were able to walk through the door, and they're in essence on Earth, and maybe that's how they were able to track Wanda, whether it is that they're feeling the supernatural power that she's using, or if she is, a physical embodiment now of all of the stones, as Priscilla, theorized, that would emit a great amount of supernatural, magical power. And so that would attract some ne'er-do-wells in the supernatural world, and that might be where said person might have, arrived and started leeching off of that power. There's something interesting that I read.
Yeah,
I
don't know that I buy that Wanda is the Infinity Stones. I do think, if you think back to, episode 3, I think it was, when Darcy came in and said, the signal was overlaid on, cosmic microwave background radiation. Well, cosmic microwave background radiation is what was present at the Big Bang, and the Infinity Stones were created out of the Big Bang. So maybe this is a recreation of the Infinity Stones.
That's interesting as well.
I don't think they're necessarily part of Wanda, but I think maybe their energies are in there. And in the same way that you had all those people fighting for Infinity Stones before, that might explain why, various powerful people are out there. You could have multiple, as I say, it doesn't have to be Loki or Doctor Strange or anything like that, but there are a host of mystical characters in the Marvel Universe who might just be showing up, trying to do that. So
exactly. Stay tuned, listeners. So now it is time for the MVP, the most valuable player. State which character impressed you throughout the episode and why. Once a character has been chosen, they cannot be selected again, so choose wisely. I'm going to go first because I hardly ever go first, and that allows me to pick Agnes. Catherine Hahn was everything. I loved that scene. It was a tiny scene with Agnes. I feel like this is the least we've seen of Agnes since episode, it wasn't that long ago, but episode 4, which was the episode that was focused on the outside. So it was just a tiny scene, but Catherine Hahn sold it. Whatever it is that she was trying to sell, I'm still not sure. Is she an ally? Is she a villain? Was she manipulative? Was she trying to push Vision? I don't know. And I think upon rewatching, we still really won't know until we find out who she is, what she's doing, and why she's doing it. But she was phenomenal in that scene. It was such a highlight for the episode. I mean, there were so many highlights in this episode because it was just chock full of information and of just really interesting sequences. But I loved Catherine Hahn, so she's my MVP. Professor, what about you? Who's your MVP and why?
I will go with Quicksilver because I don't know what he's up to, but it's obviously something. And I just really, really loved the way he played it. It was just, he's clearly playing two different characters. One when he's, part of the show with the kids. Oh, another thing that I forgot to mention is that early in the episode when Billy is doing his aside to the
yes
to the viewers. Quicksilver is aware of that and is looking at him as he's doing it. And I don't think other people were aware when these monologues to cameras were happening,
Correct.
which I think is kind of interesting as well.
Yes, I was going to bring that up when I was talking about Pietro and my suspicions of him. But yes, I'm glad that you brought it up because I noticed that immediately. I was like, he's looking at him doing his, fourth wall breakage. And I'm like, he's not supposed to do that. So and that led me to wonder, is that because he heard exactly what Billy said? Is that what inspired him to go and in essence save Wanda from Vision? Because they were having an argument. And then that's when he's like, oh, don't worry, Uncle P's here, I will take him trick-or-treating, Vision can go do his thing. Was he wanting Vision to go do his thing? All right, so now it's time to rate the episode. How would you rate this episode on a scale of 1 to 10 televisions? The point system is allowed. If you found the episode exceptional, deserving of more than a 10, you may grant it the coveted golden television. Professor, go ahead.
I'm a bit torn. I didn't quite like it as much as the last episode for some reason. So I'm going to give it 10 out of 10. I wouldn't quite give this one the golden simply because, I think that, there are so many theories out there and I feel that, they're not giving us all the information we need. But still damned enjoyable. And, I've watched it 3 times. So obviously, it was enjoyable. I'll give it 10 out of 10, which, I'm, saying it wasn't that great. So I'm giving it, a near perfect score.
Exactly. I will co-sign. I'll give it a solid 10 as well. A really great episode of WandaVision. So many questions. Maybe not as many answers, but it certainly the setup for answers to come were all over this episode. And it was a great final installment of the second act of WandaVision. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I thought everybody was fantastic. So on that note, join us next time for a brand new installment of the Avengers Initiative, WandaVision. Here's our announcer to remind you on how you can interact with us.
Follow Poppy Chula Radio on social media. We are on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, at Poppy Chula Radio. Do you have any questions, suggestions, comments, or concerns? Email us via contact@poppychularadio.com. Are you interested in joining the Poppy Chula Radio team as an on-air personality? Email talent@poppychularadio.com. Binge listen to your favorite Poppy Chula Radio programs by visiting poppychularadio.com/archives. You can also download tonight's broadcast and the rest of the series through Apple Podcasts and Google Play. Just search for The Avengers Initiative, WandaVision, and subscribe.
Thanks, announcer. My co-host, please wish the listeners a good night.
Good night, everyone.
Thanks for tuning in. Download new episodes of the Avengers Initiative WandaVision every Tuesday via Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and the Poppy Chula Radio archives. Good night.